at the meeting, another burning issue discussed was financial inclusion. And the e-NAIRA is believed will play a part in deepening financial inclusion in Nigeria. Well, to discuss this and more, we have Mr. Yele Okeremi, MD CEO, Precise Financial System, joining us on Business Morning today. Great to have you on the program, sir. Good morning.
Very good morning, Ladi. How are you today?
Fine, thank you. Great to have you. Well, we see money has evolved, so over the years from barter, metals, and others. Now we have, cryptocurrencies, which in turn has brought about central bank digital currencies to the fore. What's your take on this current trend of internet money?
Well, the bottom line is that internet money is inevitable because everything in life today is absolutely digital. So it's an inevitability. It's about countries riding on the waves to get the best they can. And I think for me, Nigeria has done a smart thing, not trying to resist it, or rather than resisting it, riding on it. So I think it is something that nobody can resist it. It's a moving train. It's going to move. It's going to crush anything in its way. That's the way I feel about it.
Right, and most countries, use a couple of definitions, for financial inclusion, often using bank account ownership or, access to savings and loan products as proxies for financial access. But how much of an impact will, central bank digital currencies have, in banking the unbanked and actually improving financial inclusion? Take, for instance, in Nigeria.
Yes, basically, you see, when we look at the factors about banking the unbanked, there are several factors involved. I think for me, and these studies the results will differ from society to society. For me, I think if we take a look at our own local environment, I think the biggest challenge for financial inclusion is economic inclusion. And I've said this several times. I've said it on this platform before, your channel, that it's impossible to include somebody financially if the person is economically excluded. However, there are certain other factors that we know in other places, and even in Nigeria, that affect financial inclusion, which may include the cost of having financial transactions, which may also include the convenience or the ease of opening accounts and the likes. So I will say that the central bank digital currencies help within the ambits of perhaps ease of getting people to have wallets. Because essentially, if you take a look at what central bank digital currencies do or what they really mean, they are just a substitute for cash. So what that means is that anybody that has cash is eligible, so to speak, to have a digital currency wallet. So to that extent, I think there's some value. But if we are going to talk about financial inclusion very seriously in this country, I think the first and foremost thing we really need to do is have an economy that works. Let's have a productive economy, an economy that does not just talk about growth, but that talks about development, an economy that doesn't just talk about creating money, but talks about creating wealth, an economy that doesn't talk about creating some giants, but having what I would call an inclusive society where it's not about one, two persons becoming trillionaires or billionaires, but where we have majority of the populace involved in the complexities of driving the economy. Now, if we take care of some of these factors that I've spoken about, I want to believe that my opinion is that financial inclusion will also sort out itself. However, the central bank digital currency has some value when you talk about financial inclusion.
Okay, but also there are concerns that, with the e-NAIRA wallet now, this would actually create, a direct link between the central bank and individuals as customers, thereby reducing, deposits with commercial banks. So what do you think about this?
Whoever said that is correct, and that's the truth. Because you see, if you take a look at what this is all about, look, what does the internet really do? What the internet really does at the end of the day is disintermediation. And so if you take a look at all these things we're talking about, digital currencies and all the likes, is trying to achieve more of financial disintermediations. And so you realize that the role of banks that they used to play traditionally, where people would just want to, one of the roles that banks used to play, or still play right now, is safekeeping of money. So you are afraid because you don't want to keep your cash in your house. You believe that if you keep it in the bank, it is safe. All right. So that's one of the reasons why banks have deposits, if you understand what I mean. However, with the central bank digital currency, that particular need for safekeeping of cash will no longer be required. Because what that means is that nobody really needs to keep any cash. We all are, what we really need to do is have digital wallets, and then the central bank becomes the banker of all. And to that extent, there will be financial disintermediation of banks. But it doesn't completely remove or eliminate what banks will still do in the economy. But to that extent of where people want to just keep monies for safekeeping, of course, there will be no need to do that anymore. If it's just safekeeping, just keep it in your wallet.
All right, and the central bank is also contemplating, series of options to push, adoption of the e-NAIRA, with collection of taxes, through the e-NAIRA. And the governor also said is the wallet has gotten about 600,000 downloads. Does that mean adoption?
Well, so when we do stuff like this, and incidentally, anytime you have a technological innovation, right, it sits on the tripod. It sits first on the technology innovation itself. That's like, coming up with a concept. And sometimes we say we have a solution waiting for a problem. And because you are technologically advanced, that's one leg. The other leg is social. How do the people accept this technology that's coming on? I mean, take a look. The internet is there. It does very many things. But how have people received it? So internet is successful because there are so many use cases that make people realize that on a day-to-day basis, they have to use it. And then the third leg that helps these things to work is legislation and regulations. And so sometimes there might be need for specific regulations to ensure that at the end of the day, what you are trying to do is useful and people are protected. So I see that the central bank, having come up with brilliant innovation, about the e-NAIRA, is now trying to find a means of making society accept it. And one of the ways they are trying to do is using legislation and regulation. So perhaps one of the things they might be able to say is that you want to pay taxes up to a particular amount of money, then you must use the e-NAIRA, just to allow people to use it, to feel it, and probably begin to try to do smart things with it in the future.
But do you think, the e-NAIRA could actually help in reducing the incidences of tax evasion?
Tax evasion, I don't see the link between tax evasion and the e-NAIRA. Because you see, when you talk about taxation, the first and foremost thing you have to understand is what's the tax net? How much of the people are in the tax net? And then secondly, about taxation is assessment. Now, if you have a tax net and you have been able to do assessment, then the next thing is collection of taxes. Now, essentially what the central, what the FIRA, or basically I think the Joint Tax Board, or basically all the tax bodies are trying to do is using banks as agents to collect taxes. And what that means is that, Ladi, if you are assessed of a particular tax that you are liable to pay a certain amount of money and you refuse to pay it, then they can use your balances in your bank to set it off. And it happened some time ago that so many organizations had their accounts virtually frozen or lien, so to speak. So what that means is that if you have more people using the e-NAIRA, it means that in a way, if they are assessed already and they haven't paid the taxes, then there is a possibility that the e-NAIRA wallet may be used as a lien. But you see, if you really take a look, I haven't done any serious study about this, but perhaps the people who are involved in tax practices will help us do studies to know whether the challenge is the ability to collect taxes or the ability to assess taxes appropriately or the ability to even have an appropriate tax net. What percentage of Nigerians pay taxes. And that also speaks to what I spoke about earlier when I spoke about inclusive economies. So what we see is that there's a lot of concentration on big companies, on big earners, and those are the people that everybody is concentrating on. But when we have a much more productive economy, then we have a larger tax net, then the challenges of assessment and collection of taxes will change. Because today, I tell you what, majority of people that pay taxes don't need the e-NAIRA wallet for the government to get their taxes from them. They can always get their taxes from their bank accounts today.
Right, right. Well, but also in a bid to deepen adoption, the central bank is also, asked payment service banks and fintechs to develop and introduce, products that are based on the e-NAIRA. What do you think are the possibilities here?
Now, there's a lot of possibilities, actually. So all we really need to understand, and I think what the central bank is trying to do, and that makes a lot of sense to me, is, okay, listen, guys, we've created a platform for you. What we want you to do right now is to use it. And so what they are expecting is for people to develop what you call use cases. So the fintechs, as innovators, will now be able to say, for instance, if you want to make payments for certain things, you may be able to make the payments rather than making payments directly from bank accounts. You may be able to make the payments using the e-NAIRA. And once this kind of innovations begin to happen, then of course you expect there will be a lot more traction and a lot more adoption of the e-NAIRA. I think it's a smart way to go.
And looking, that, Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies actually, drove, central banks to start looking at central bank digital currencies. What do you think, would happen to the likes of Bitcoin?
So let me just make a statement about this. You see, the challenge about, the cryptocurrencies, and I've even seen people argue whether the central bank digital currencies are cryptocurrencies or not. And I want to state equivocally that, yes, they all belong to the category of cryptocurrencies. But the issue is that when you look at these instruments, and I'm using it as an economic term now, these are instruments, financial instruments. The credibility of any financial instrument depends on the issuer of that instrument. Now, to be very honest, I've seen a lot of people trying to discredit central banks. And I think it just doesn't make sense. You want people to distrust the central bank and trust people that they do not know. Even the Bible says it, that thou hypocrite, you say you love God that you have not seen, but you do not love your brother. Hey, give me a break. If you really understand what is going on, your biggest trust should be in sovereign countries. But what has happened is that social unrest, and not just in Nigeria, in very many countries, and particularly countries where you have very weak governments, have allowed so much distrust to fester, so that the citizens of countries do no longer trust the leadership, the political leadership, and even the financial leadership of countries. And that's why so many people are trying to keep assets in cryptocurrencies. And that's a game of risk return. But to my mind, as an individual, I would rather put my trust in people that I know, that I can see, I can sue, I can touch, than people that are using pseudonyms that I do not know, that they vaporize just at the snap of a finger. That's the way I feel. But so many people do this for their own reasons.
Because it seems that the decentralized nature of Bitcoin is actually the attraction for them. As you mentioned, distrust with the leaders and, banks nowadays.
Correct. That's the bottom line. Look, that's the only reason why anybody would say you want to put your money in, some instrument that you do not even know the issuer. You don't know the issuer of the instrument. So who is the ultimate obligor? You don't even know. And then you still trust that. I think it's something that people really need to examine. But then these are private and personal decisions.
Yeah, quite incredible decisions, I must say. Well, but it's early times for central bank digital currencies. What's your outlook going forward, like say for 2022, for instance?
Yeah, well, for central bank digital currencies, I think, look, in 2022 might be a little bit of a short run. But if we take a look at it to a longer run, let me explain the extrapolation of central bank digital currencies. What central bank digital currencies are expected to achieve is what you call the ultimate cashless economy, which means that they will substitute every single currency that you currently have, which means that if things go according to the plans of the central bank and according to thinkers, it means that there will be economies that you will absolutely see no cash anymore. It is either you have bank accounts or your monies are kept in central bank digital currencies.
All right, I guess it's interesting times ahead, I must say. All right, Mr. Yellow Keremi, MD CEO, Precise Financial System, thank you so much for coming on Business Morning.
Very great pleasure, Ladi.
Thank you.
And I wish you Merry Christmas.
Compliments of the seasons.